lot of people ask me about Excel shortcuts and how to get faster. The best way to do it is really just to practice, to try and put through a live deal, into an Excel model, and along the way you just figure it out. I wanted to put this tutorial video together today to show some of the Excel shortcuts that I've been using for a long time, and stuff that helps me out a lot, and so hopefully this can be a big help to you. This Excel shortcuts cheat sheet that we're looking at here is downloaded from Microsoft. It's just an open source shortcuts cheat sheet that has a bunch of shortcuts that you can use and go through, but I wanted to run through a lot of the ones that I use most commonly. I think a good starting place is just to know how the shortcuts are laid out. They're shortcuts and then they're shortcuts. We're just going to go over really the layer 1 shortcuts today. I'll do a couple of the layer 2 shortcuts. Layer 1 being starting with the Alt key. When you press Alt when you're in Excel, it'll open up a series of letters that correspond to the different tabs. And so the first tab is Home, H, then you have Insert, N, Page Layout, P, Formulas, M, Data, A, Review, R, View, W, and Y for Help. Most of the time I'm on the Home tab, the Insert tab, and then I would say probably Data and View are what I'm doing a lot. The others have helpful things that I use every now and again, but yeah, I would just start here. So coming down through some of the shortcuts here, the first set of shortcuts deals with the F keys above. Those are really instructional and overlay for the most part. F5 is actually pretty helpful. I'll just open up that one real quick so you can see it. So F5 is the go-to shortcut. The reason this one's really helpful is oftentimes I'll be working in an Excel book that is really large. It has references over in column W and then down in row 200 or something. So instead of just having to scroll all the way down, you can just do F5 and then go to cell W200 and then click OK, and it'll take you right there. Shortcut to get back to the beginning of the sheet that you're on would be Control Home. Control Home will bring you back to cell A1 or to the top left of the book, wherever that's out for you. Another thing about F5 that can be especially helpful is you can go to special references, and I use go to blanks a lot when I'm working in arrays that have a lot of blanks in them. So I'll show you that here on a new sheet. If you've got a couple rows of data, and I'll just put some random information into here, and this column of data has a bunch of blanks in it, but you'd like to get rid of those blanks, instead of just deleting, and I'm going through a bunch of shortcuts here, instead of just deleting, which to open up this dialog here is actually Control minus, and then you're deleting the entire row, right? What you would do is you could select this array here, do F5, special, blanks, and it'll select the blanks for you, and you do Control minus, and you're going to shift those cells up, or you're going to delete the entire row, and then now you've gotten rid of those blanks and it's a clean array for you. And this is really helpful, especially if a column has 1,000 rows of data and blanks in between there, and you want to get rid of those blanks. That can be a really helpful shortcut to do that. Moving through some of these other ones that are really common and really helpful, I like to use Control A. If you hit Control A a bunch, what it's going to do is, if you're in a relative reference, meaning that there's data around where you've selected, it's only going to select that general area. And then if you hit Control A a bunch, it's going to select the whole worksheet. And that can be helpful for conditional formatting, which we'll do in another video, or it's helpful in deleting a lot of data at once so you can restart or try and do something else. Separately, we had done the F5 key before. Control G also does the go to. I would say that both of those are the layer 2 shortcuts that we've been talking about, so that's helpful. Control F opens up the find dialog so you can search what you're looking for. Control H brings up the find and replace dialog, and you'll notice that these are side by side, but if you're working in a workbook and you want to go straight to the find and replace section, then you would do that here. I use find and replace a lot when I'm auditing workbooks, auditing and specifically correcting workbooks. This helps a lot with finding errors within formulas and replacing them all at once. I was doing a workbook correction just a couple weeks ago, and I used the find and replace tool to replace a certain formula reference, and it made over 10,000 changes all at once. And it was exactly what I needed to have happen. And you can imagine the time that it would take to go through and do all of that individually. So this can be a really helpful tool. Control K opens up the hyperlink box. So this is helpful when you're wanting to add a direct link to an external reference. So maybe you want someone to be able to go to your LinkedIn page. You can go and grab your link. So I'll demonstrate that here. We'll just go to the fractional analyst page. I'm going to view this as a member, and I'm going to copy in our hyperlink to the business page and do Control K and put in our address there. Click OK. So now you'll notice that it's highlighted in blue and underlined. So that means that there's a hyperlink in there. Another one that's really helpful, especially when creating formulas, that I like to do is, say you have a bunch of numbers up here, and you've got this summation here, which, by the way, if you wanted to do a quick summation, the shortcut for that is Alt equals, holding those down at the same time, Alt and the equal sign. And then if you're trying to copy this formula across, one way that people commonly do that, right, is you come through and you click this little plus sign in the bottom of that cell and you drag it across. So you certainly can do that, right? And that enables you to drag it across. The other way, which I find to be helpful when I'm building formulas out, is I like to come over to a helper column over here and put in a bunch of X's. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do Shift down key. That's going to highlight all of these cells over here. I'm going to do an X just as a filler letter. I'm going to do Control Enter. That's going to put a bunch of X's over here. So that way, when I'm trying to move back and forth between columns, now I can move back and forth very quickly and proceed with what I'm trying to do. So that's the helper column over there. And to move back and forth between these columns, it's Control left arrow, Control right arrow. And that gets you to the furthest left reference or the furthest right reference. Control up, Control down to do the same. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do equals rand between, and this is going to be a random number generator. And I'm going to do Shift down, Shift Control right to get us all the way over there. And to copy data through, and this is the purpose of why we're looking at this one right now, is you do Control right to move the data, to move the formulas or the values all the way to the right. Then you do Control down to do the same thing. So this has given us a bunch of random numbers, and we're going to fix these numbers or value paste these numbers now. So that is going to be Control C to copy the formulas, values, and or formatting of these cells. And you do Control Alt V to open up that Paste Special menu. And then you're going to do V again. So I'm going to escape out of this real quick. Just go again. So Shift Control down to go to the bottom of the column, and then Shift Control right to go to the far right side. I'm going to do Shift left once just to make sure that I'm only on the formulas that I'm wanting to copy and not those X's. And I'm going to do Control C to copy everything, Control Alt V to open Paste Special, and then V for values. So we're going to value paste that. And so now all of those formulas that we had in here before, Control Z to see those formulas again, all of those are now value pasted. Control Y did the redo. So now all of these are value pasted. What we're going to do here is we're trying to sum up all of these values up above. And so we'll do alt equals to sum up the closest array of values. So that's a quick way to do the sum formula. We're going to do control shift right and then shift left once to come over. And then we're going to do control right. So that brings that sum formula all the way over. And the way that I'm opening up these formulas is I'm doing F2. If you have a keyboard like mine that doesn't have an FN lock, then there should be an FN key that you have to push each time. But hopefully your keyboard's better. So then what I do, I would label this like, data input 1, data input 2, data input 3, and then total. Now that I'm doing that, you can kind of see my mind as an analyst that I always like to make things better. A way that you can make this a little more dynamic is you can actually highlight over all of these, and we're going to overlay some formatting onto this, so that way we can just put in numbers and it'll say the same thing, but then you can copy that down. So Control 1 opens up the Format Cells dialog, and this is going to overlay some formatting on this. So generally formatting is just for changing it into a number, changing it into a currency, all of that. But you can also come in and apply custom formatting. And custom formatting, what this is going to do is we're going to do quotation mark, data input, close quotation, space 0. So what that does is this is now going to say, hey, anytime you put in a number here, it's going to be data input space the number that you put in. So we're going to do that, and we're going to delete the information that was there before, right? So we had data input there before. So now we can put in the number 1, and it'll say data input 1, 2, data input 2, etc. You could also do, now that this is a number with formatting applied on it, you could reference that cell and do that cell plus 1, right? And then copy it down, and you get everything that you had there before. Now, a best practice that I actually didn't do here, but I'm going to show you here now, is anytime you're summing up values up above, anytime that you need to add a row into here and you want to add more data, right? Maybe instead of only 3 data inputs, you have 10, but you didn't know that before. When you add rows, Excel doesn't know to keep those new rows into your summation formula. Wish it did, but if it's right up against the data inputs, then anytime you add a row, which is going to be Shift space to highlight the row, and then Control Shift plus to add a row. So now if you go and look in that formula, Excel is not taking into account row 22 here, right? It's still only doing those. Let's just do a couple more here. So let's say I added a bunch of rows, right? So I added a bunch of rows now, and now Excel isn't picking that up. So what you're going to want to do there is, just as a best practice, let's actually just add a couple more rows in there. You always want to leave 1 or 2 rows empty when you create this sum formula. That way, if you ever add in more rows, right, you come in here, Shift space to highlight the row, Control Shift plus to add a bunch of rows. Well, now this formula down here is picking everything up, and that's helpful. So then we would just copy that over like we did before, right? So Control Shift right, and then Shift left once to bring it over, and then Control R is going to copy that formula all the way over to the end of your highlighted row. And so now you've got this good dynamic summation formula here. What we're doing in this video is very simplistic, but hopefully you can see the concepts apply when you're building financial models from scratch. You're doing something complex for an employer or a client. These are the kinds of shortcuts that I'm using all the time when I'm building my stuff. Just continuing on this demo of really this copying over series, I'll call it. Now we're going to copy down this data input that we had done before, right? So these cells here, if I put in a 2, the conditional formatting is actually copied down when we added the rows, which is convenient. You'll notice down here that it's not copied down, and that's intentional. We don't want conditional formatting down here, we just need it here. But if we come here to data input 3, we do Control Shift down to go to total, and then Shift up once, and then we do Control D. This will copy that all down to show more lines for more data inputs. Now you'll notice here you have this these number signs popping through. That doesn't mean an error. That means that the text in this column is just slightly too big for the size of the column. So here's another shortcut, sizing a column. There's a couple ways to do it, and this is going to get into the layer 1 shortcuts. Oftentimes when the column is too small, people just come up to the column, right, and you have this little cursor and you double click it and it opens it up for you. Some people don't even know to double click it. They'll actually just come up here and drag it, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you're on this video to get faster. So one thing that I do to auto size the column is you open up Alt, and then go to the Home tab, H, and then you'll go all the way over to Formatting, O, and then cell sizing, auto sizing the column, or auto fitting the column width is I. Let's do Control Z and do that one more time. Alt H O I. And now you've auto sized the column. Particularly on columns with a lot of data, what you can do is you can highlight the whole column by doing Control space, and then you can do that same auto fitting the column, and that will then apply to everything in that column. So say we had, let's do Control Z one more time just to bring that into being small. Say we had something that was really long and we had something over here. So this something over here is blocking all of this data from being seen. And if we just autofit the column based on this data input 10, Alt H O I, it sizes the column for data input 10, but it doesn't do it for this data down here. So you do Control space, and then do Alt H O I. So that'll now show you everything in that column. Now, oftentimes visually you don't want this to be that large, just because the rest of the data in that column isn't that long, so it looks awkward. So something that you can do is you can wrap the text in that specific cell. So that would be Alt H W to wrap text. And then you would come in here, and this is when I do a little bit of manual sizing, because I'm trying to get this onto 2 lines instead of onto 3. I do a little bit of manual sizing there. Auto fitting the row would be Alt H O A, right? So that's going to pull this row size up to be more appropriate for that that specific data. Coming forward, so we did a lot on Control D and Control R. We talked about Control G, which was the same as FN F5. We walked through Control A. Standard formatting can be helpful. So the standard formatting would be for bolding, italicizing, and underlining. So sometimes in data you see the helper column, once we added all the rows, right, needs to be fixed again. So X and then Control Enter. Sometimes when you're doing a lot of data and you're summing it up, it can be helpful to delineate, where the summation formula is versus the data input, and it's not always clear just from the labels on the left. So what you can do is Control Shift right down at the bottom, right above total, and then Shift left, So that way we're only looking at our little table here that we've created. And you can do Alt-HB. So Alt-HB opens the borders menu, and then you can do a bottom border. So that would be a single black line that gives you a bottom border, and that can be really nice. Something else that I would do with this particular table is I might highlight the whole thing, do Alt-HBS, right? So that gives you a total outline border for the whole thing. And then I might do the same for this total down here. And assuming that this is a table that I'm trying to present to somebody, I might even make a title up here. So with that, I would do another total border, Alt-HBS. And then I would do Control-1, and this will open up the numbers menu again, the formatting menu, and I'd come to alignment, and then to horizontal alignment, I'd center it across the selection, and OK. So what that does is this is now going to center text above this box without using the merge and center function. So I'll show you why I like to do that here in a second. So let's just say this is data table 1, something like that. So now what this is it gives you this nice presentable table that you could then go copy into a PowerPoint or into your slide deck that you're going to maybe present to your lender or present to your investors, present to your boss, whoever that might be. Digging further into it, now that we're getting into presentation talk, this is the stuff that I like to do. So on almost all of my workbooks, I remove these grid lines. They can be helpful in certain situations, but I find that especially if I'm putting things into presentation, I don't want to have these grid lines in there. I'd rather it just be empty, and I can create grid lines with coloring and stuff, but I don't like the default ones. And so what I would do is I would remove those grid lines. I would go to Alt-W, which is going to bring me to the View tab, and I'm going to do VG for grid lines. So that is going to remove all the grid lines, and now you have this really clean table that can be used for presentations. So digging further into presentations and just doing things that are more practical, what I would do is I would do Control-Shift right and then Shift left. So now I'm just looking at the title, and I want to color the title. So let's do Alt-H, and that's going to open up our color bucket menu. And then I'm just going to use my right arrow key to move through the colors. I'm going to give it a black theme. I'm going to do Alt-HFC to open up our font colors. And I'm going to give it a white color. So now we've got this black title with white color, and I'm going to do Control-B to bold it. And so now we've got this really nice title for our table. Similarly for this particular box, so there's going to be a lot of data in this box, and we want people to be able to read it clearly. So let's assume that that smaller numbers in this box are good and bigger numbers are bad. Let's just make that assumption. So what we can do is we can do some conditional formatting. Instead of having to go and color code everything separately, what we can do is we can conditional format it. So we're going to go to Alt-HL to open conditional formatting, and we'll go to color scales. So color scales are automatic coloring based on the size of the number. So we said that lower numbers are good and bigger numbers are bad. So this red, yellow, green color scale can be helpful. Is specifically in this situation, that's probably going to be the easiest one. There's other ways that I would probably do this, just depending on what the actual data output is, but let's just use that for now. Again, let's let's fill out the rest of the box so we get accurate conditional formatting here. So the way that I selected everything, you do Control Shift down, right, and then let go of Control but hold Shift, and go up one, and then left one, and now you've selected everything. We're going to put some random numbers in here again. So rand between, and we're going to go 1 to 1,000 this time. Hit close the parenthesis and then hit Control Enter. That's going to add everything in there. And let's go ahead and do Control C. Oh, sorry. Control C and then Control Alt V. And that looks good. So all of this is probably looking okay, but you might be looking at it and wondering, okay, well, we have these data inputs here on the left, but what's the purpose of the columns? So that's an important thing, right, is to actually label our columns. So let's just assume that these are dates. Let's say that this was like 12 months ago or something. So we're going to put 7/2023, and then we're going to do edate for the formula, and we've got to format it. So edate just brings the exact date forward 1 month, and then Control C, Control Alt V, and then T formats that accordingly. We're going to do Control Shift right and Shift left once. Control R brings all of that forward. So we're going from July of 2023 through September of 2024. So there's a little bit of projection data in here. So that could be something that could be helpful too, is labeling what are actuals versus what are projections. So let's do Shift space and Control Shift plus to add a row. And so then what we'll do is we'll say, we'll put in a analysis date here. Oops. And we'll say that the analysis date is today. How you do the shortcut for today's date is, I'll go out of that, you do Control semicolon. Control semicolon gives you today's date. So then we're going to do a little formula here. We're going to do a simplified formula that I like to use. You can do if statements, and we'll get into if logic and Boolean statements and stuff like that later. But this is going to be a simplified one. So if the current date is less than the analysis date, we're going to do that times our true statement. So if you've done if statements, you know that it's if the test is true, then you're going to return a certain value, and then it also has a false value. What this function does is it only assumes a true statement. So actually, this one doesn't work. It's helpful when you know that the statement is always going to be true, and if it is false, then it's going to return a 0 value. So it works especially well with numerical functions, but with stuff like this where you want to return text, it's actually going to be better to do an if statement. So let's do that. If current date is less than the analysis date, and we're going to lock that reference to the analysis date, and that is just the F4 key. F4 cycles through relative references. So I just hit F4 and it unlocked the column reference, but it locks the row reference. So if I copied this formula forward, that would actually not be helpful for us because it's going to move the reference of the column accordingly. If I hit it again, it's going to lock the reference, which would be helpful here, but if we ever copied this formula down, then we'd lose that reference again going down this way. So there's situations where you do want to have those relative references, but in this situation we're going to lock it entirely. So if the current date that we're looking at is less than the analysis date, then we're going to say actual. Otherwise, we're going to say projection. Okay, so we're going to copy that, and we'll move up one row because if you notice over to the right, if I tried to go control right, it's going to take me all the way to the end of the workbook. And the reason for that is because we added a row, and so our helper column got broken again. But if you go up, the helper column is there. We can add an X over there. I'm going to copy it, and we're going to do Control Shift right, Shift left, Control Alt F. We'll bring up the paste special and do formulas only. You could do Control R, right, to just bring it to that spot. The reason that I'm so used to doing pasting formulas only is because I work in workbooks with a lot of conditional formatting. And Control R brings over not only the formula, but it brings over the formatting. And so oftentimes I like to just copy the formula only. It keeps the workbook cleaner. So yeah, but now you have this here, which shows us that, hey, most of your data is actuals. There's actually 2 months of data that are projections in here, so just make sure that you're aware of that. That's a lot of information on copying things over, on copying them down, on pasting formulas, pasting everything. But I hope you can see through that how practical these shortcuts can be and how much time they can save. There are a whole bunch of other shortcuts in here, tons of stuff that I use all the time, didn't get into, but I'll leave the the link for this. We've included the open source shortcuts on our website. If you just go to our website, plug in your email into the pop-up that pops up, it'll bring you to our resource page, which has a bunch of free downloads, this being one of them. And so you can get that. You can also search for it online, very easily. But hope you enjoyed the shortcut tutorial. I know that a lot of it was probably new, but hopefully it was practical. Hopefully you got a lot out of it. I enjoy making these. It's one of the ways that I can provide free content, where a lot of the stuff that I'm doing as a business owner is paid content, but this helps people understand, what we do as analysts and how it can serve their business. So happy to put it out there for the general public too.